Senator McCormick.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, and Chairman Powell, good to see you again. In the past 5 years alone, the national debt has exploded. Federal spending and the debt have increased by more than 50%. Debt held by the public, or true debt obligation, has more than tripled during the past 15 years, reaching more than $28 trillion. All told, U.S. national debt is now over 120% of our GDP. And runaway spending contributed to a regressive tax on all Americans, a tax known as inflation. In the past 5 years, the cost of living has skyrocketed for working-class Pennsylvanians, especially, as you and I discussed when we visited, those relying on fixed incomes. And unfortunately, that compounded effect of inflation has not been offset by commensurate rise in wages for many Pennsylvanians. I've heard from countless Pennsylvanians who had to count their dollars at the gas pump, cancel family trips, even tighten their belts at the dinner table because of inflation. So while we discuss these heady issues, let's not lose sight of the very real human cost of the decisions made by people sitting in this room. And given that cost, I'd like to ask you about the national debt and the cost of financing it. We now spend more to service the debt annually than we do on national defense. So how concerned are you about the accelerating pace of government borrowing and the borrowing cost, which will affect families in the form of higher mortgage rates?
Yeah, you know, we don't comment on fiscal policy other than to say that, as my predecessors have said, that the U.S. federal budget is on an unsustainable path. It's not that the level of spending or the level of the debt itself is unsustainable. It's that the path is unsustainable, and ultimately the level of the debt will be. So there's no time like the present to start working on this. The longer we wait, the more painful it will be. It's something we need to do and will have to do in the long run, and the short run is better than the long run for that.
And just as a practical matter, how do you factor that into your policy thinking and decisions?
We don't. You know, we're here to achieve maximum employment and price stability, and it's really up to Congress to deal with fiscal issues, and we leave that to you.
Well, just as a more practical question, I think which falls clearly in your bailiwick, because of that national debt, it's caused the supply of U.S. Treasuries needed to finance the debt to skyrocket. And that's at the same time the Fed is shrinking its holdings of Treasury through quantitative tightening. So the question is, or could you at least give us some insight into the impact that this is having on the Treasury market as investors must absorb that supply? And in particular, I'm interested in how the biggest holders of U.S. Treasuries, how their behavior is changing as debt increases.
So this is a real Treasury question, but I think from our standpoint, I can say that there are lots of buyers for Treasuries, but Treasury buyers are going to be factoring in their assessments of the supply that's coming, and that may be part of the reason why the term premium has increased, as you know, over the course of this year. Although, you know, the rates have been going up and down lately. They're almost back to where they were before the election.
I know the Fed has been moving forward with comprehensive changes to the stress test process. Could you discuss how you're thinking about reducing the volatility of the results and increasing transparency on the stress test?
So on transparency, we're going to release the models, clean them up and publish the models, put them out for comment. In terms of volatility, we're also going to release the stress test scenarios before we implement them. In terms of volatility, what we said we would do is average the changes to, the problem is the stress capital buffer can be moving up and down just because of volatility in the results, and it seemed like a good idea to smooth that out by averaging over a couple of years. We're putting all this out for comment, though, and ultimately we'll reflect those comments in the final decisions we make.
Thank you. I'll yield back my time.